My parents abandoned me when I was 4 years old. 13 years later, they showed up on my porch and told me it was time to come home. I didn't understand what was happening at first. I was 4. I didn't have a word for any of it. All I knew is that my aunt and uncle's house smelled like coffee and clean laundry. They had a dog named Biscuit, and my room had glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. And I figured I was on a really long sleepover. A week passed, then another. My aunt signed me up for preschool. My uncle packed my lunch every single morning, always a juice box and those little crackers with the peanut butter. At some point, I stopped asking when my parents were coming. I honestly don't even remember the exact moment I stopped. I just did. Here's what I found out years later. My little sister had been born seriously sick. The doctors weren't sure she'd make it to 2 years old. My biological parents were completely consumed by that. Every hospital visit, every specialist, every terrifying night, and somewhere in the middle of keeping her alive, they looked at me, the healthy one, the easy one, the one who wasn't hooked up to anything, and they decided I was the one they could afford to lose. So they drove me to my aunt and uncle's house one afternoon and never came back. I found out the whole story when I was 10. My aunt sat me down at the kitchen table with hot chocolate, the kind with little marshmallows, and walked me through all of it. She was gentle about it, almost calm, like she'd been rehearsing that conversation for years, which she probably had. I remember the hot chocolate going completely cold while she talked. I never touched it. When she finished, I didn't cry. I went to my room, dug out the one photo I still had of my biological parents, and I tore it into pieces so small they looked like confetti. Then I made myself a promise. That chapter was done. It was closed. And I was the one holding the pen from now on. That same year, I started calling my aunt and uncle mom and dad. They didn't make it into a whole ceremony. The first time I said it, my uncle just looked up from his newspaper, nodded once like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and went right back to reading. That was the moment I knew I was exactly where I belonged. The years went on. I'd run into my biological parents occasionally, a grocery store parking lot, a distant relative's wedding. I never went up to them. They'd say things like, "You look so grown up," and I'd look straight through them and keep walking. It wasn't even painful by then. It was just nothing. They were nothing. My sister kept hitting birthdays. My biological parents had been terrified she'd never reach 15, 16. I didn't know any of that. I was over here doing homework at the kitchen table while my dad burned dinner and my mom laughed at him for it. Normal things, real things. Mine. Then last week they showed up. I came downstairs and there they were on the porch. My biological mother holding a gift bag with pink tissue paper sticking out the top. My biological father smiling, the kind of smile that already expects to be smiled back at. My sister standing just behind them, looking like she wanted to disappear straight through the floorboards. My biological father did most of the talking, said they'd been through so much together as a family. Said my sister was doing really well now. Said it felt like the right time to reconnect. He kept using words like healing and whole again. And then he said it. "Well, you think it's time you came home?" I looked at him for a moment and said, "I am home." The smile dropped. He tried a different angle. Said I was being emotional, that I needed to think about what it would mean for our family to finally be whole. I told him our family was already whole. It had been whole for years. He just wasn't in it. Then he raised his voice. Said I was being disrespectful, that he was still my father, that I owed him the decency of a real conversation. I didn't raise my voice back. I didn't need to. I told him he made his choice 13 years ago when he left a 4-year-old at someone else's house and drove away, that I made mine the night I found out, and that some choices you don't get to take back just because they stopped being convenient for you. My biological mother was crying by then. She kept saying she was sorry, that she hadn't known what else to do, that leaving me was the hardest decision she'd ever made in her life. And honestly, I believe her. I think it probably was hard, but hard isn't the same as right. And sorry doesn't rebuild 13 years of nothing. They left. My sister looked back at me once before she followed them down the driveway. I don't know what she was thinking. I hope she's okay. None of this was ever her fault. I went back inside and sat down at the table. My mom came in from the kitchen and just looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said, "Yeah, can you pass the bread?" She laughed and handed it over. My dad came in a minute later and we all just sat there, eating dinner like it was any other night. Because it was. That's the part they're never going to understand. For them, last week was some kind of turning point they'd been building toward for years. Some big emotional moment. For me, it was just Tuesday. Was I wrong to shut the door completely? Or was this the only answer I was ever going to give? Drop it in the comments.